In this video, we are going to be building two brand new Adirondack chairs based off of this original design that I picked up for free. I have two of these. They were scheduled for the burn pile, so we're going to make some adjustments to the design. They're going to look better, they're going to last longer as well. And in the end, we are going to end up with a fusion file and also a step file that you can download for free, and you can build your own set if you'd like to as well. So if you're interested in checking out how to build these chairs, stick around to find out. So I picked up these two chairs from a lady off of Facebook Marketplace for free, and my plan was to replace all the rotted and split parts and broken parts and then repaint everything. And at first glance, they really didn't look that bad, but the closer that I looked, the worse they got, and it did not seem after all that it was going to be a good idea. These are the most comfortable Adirondack chairs that I've ever sat in, and I still wanted to get some value out of these, so instead I decided that it would be smarter to start from scratch, make all new pieces, and along with that we would end up with a 3D model that actually moves and we can see the folding action, and also from there we can tweak it and improve the design a bit as well. Okay, so here's what's wrong with chair number one. We have this piece, which is not original. It looks like at some point the original one broke and they replaced it with this rudimentary looking one. A couple of extra screws that do not belong there. And there's some screws on the inside as well on both sides. This does not fold anymore, so it's all just locked into place. On the armrest, you can see quite a bit of wobble and motion there. A big crack up here for this, what I think is a terrible design for a cup holder. And I think that comes down to this bolt just being a little bit too loose on the front and on the back there as well. So we can see a break right here at the top, and then the same exact thing on the other side, just a little bit worse on this side. There's an area here on this mid rail where we have a screw that's actually not going in anymore. There's a split there. It looks as though this piece was actually laminated. It wasn't wide enough and they made it up of several pieces, so that's probably why. This is a screw that was added, which is not actually going into the piece of wood, and I don't believe that that is original. And on this side here, the screw is actually gone, and you can see where it went in to the armrest there. So we're really lucky here. We actually have the original parts on chair number two right along here. But this chair actually has some other issues. So you can see right here, look how bad this bottom rail is. It's just rotten, falling to pieces. You can see as well that this piece has split almost the exact same as the other one. I have to wonder whether this was made up of two separate pieces and that was a glue joint, because it's almost a straight line. Again, the same type of thing. We have a split here. We have a few extra screws as well. They've also pinned this in place in the hopes that it wouldn't fold anymore. In this case, the top rail is actually in decent shape on both sides, and the mid rail, the same thing. Pretty decent shape on both sides. Again, the armrest on the front, probably a little bit worse shape than the last one, and you'll notice here that the cup holder was partially to blame for that, because if you look on the other side, we don't have the same issues. So what I'd like to do first is see if we can get this to fold, because I don't know how this folds up. So I'm going to take out the screws that are preventing that from happening. Okay, so based off of what I'm seeing here, this does not belong here. So these were added at some point to both chairs. So these are just going to come off. So I'm going to take this one off and I'm going to use it as a template. As I was taking the screws out, the bottom of it completely broke off. Almost every screw in there is different. So this one's not in terrible shape, but you can see pretty defined line here where this was laminated. So this is made up of two pieces that are glued together, so not really ideal for outdoor furniture. You can see originally it had some type of a sealant, shellac or varnish on it. So the original looks to me to be some type of mahogany. I don't have mahogany, but I do have some black cherry. I think this is going to work really well, and the length looks just about right for what we need. So I need to get this big blank into some smaller pieces that we can actually work with. So I ended up getting three pieces, 1 inch thick. These are planed now to thickness, and that way they're clear. I can see what I'm working with. So what I did differently with this one is I am making it a little bit thicker, and that is going to increase the strength a little bit. And the other thing is that these ends being cut perfectly straight like this are a little bit weak because we have a screw coming in here. This could easily split. So if we continue this on a bit of a curve and have it die in a little bit nicer, I think that's going to be better. I'm going to do that on both ends. So I've come in by 35 millimeters here and made a mark. And I'm just going to use the compass and draw a little bit of a curve there. So there's our new cherry top rail. Definitely looks a lot better than the original. And this will be painted as well. So we're at the CNC machine. I have the blank that I'd like to use. I have my part loaded here. You can see the rail. Now part of the reason that I'm going to be doing it this way is because I'm taking the time to draw all the replacement parts anyway, and may as well actually machine them on the CNC to make sure that they work correctly. In the end, this should look identical to the previous one that we made by hand. Now one thing I just noticed is that my part is upside down from what I was expecting. So what I'd like to actually do is flip it around all the way, and that way it works better with the grain. And there is a new version. A little bit of burning there. So normally what I was doing was climb cutting all the way around, so I did the majority of the passes that way. And the final two passes I came down and I removed just a small amount of material in a conventional cutting approach. And you can see here I was able to get rid of some of the burning, but not quite all of that burning. So a little bit of sanding, again rounding over these edges, and we'll be done this part. Okay, let's see how we did. So here's the original on top, and you can see we extend slightly beyond each end for that little curvature that we added. Looks great on the outside as well. And just like before, it is thicker as well. So these are not original, obviously. Ooh, look at that. Look how close, look how close that is. It's pretty rotted on the inside there. And really rotted here. This is dry rot. Just coming apart easily. Shouldn't have done that. I need to take that measurement. So I just took a few minutes and I traced out this shape. And I did make a little bit of a change here. I'm going to adjust that radius in the corner just to reinforce this section. This is the blank that I want to use to make this part, and actually I'm going to make two of them at the same time. You can see they're going to fit on and kind of nest together just like this. This is actually a really nice piece of cherry, except this area here, the heart of the tree, is rotten. There's some fungus that had been growing in there. So this is really not going to be usable. So this fits really well here. And for this section here, I thought I may as well go ahead and try and remake some wooden versions of these original pivot arms. A lot of these parts can be done by hand, but it's certainly going to be a lot easier using the CNC machine because this design uses a lot of curves. And it might not look like it, but these chairs are made up of 31 individual wood parts. And if I were to be making all of them on the CNC machine, on average, it takes about 3 minutes to run each part. And if we add on some cleanup time and loading and unloading parts, it's nearly 2 hours to make the parts for just one chair in my particular setup. Now I am running them with a small Makita trim router and a 1/4 inch carbide double fluted compression cutter, making 2 light finishing passes. On my machine, the router is definitely the biggest bottleneck. It can only handle about 5 millimeters in depth in hardwood at 4,500 millimeters per minute, or 6 millimeters in depth in some softer woods. Okay, that wasn't very good. Luckily, I have some extra fuses. But not so lucky is that they are only 4 amp fuses, and what I actually need is 10 amp. And instead I'm going to operate the router manually. I'm just going to plug it directly into the wall rather than going through the CNC router. Lesson learned, rough passes first. Eventually I'd like to upgrade this CNC to have a proper CNC spindle, one that can go forward and in reverse as well. So overall, not too bad. What I really should have done was do my perimeter passes first and then come back here and do these tenons. And that would have helped prevent all of these problems. So I need to get this flipped over and I need to get it repositioned in the exact spot to do these tenons on the other side. One thing I will change in the design is that you see how it stops a little bit short of the end there for the arc, and I'm guessing that's just to save a little bit of material on the width of the blank required, but it really needs to continue along a bit further and end right at the end here. So I will update that. Other than that, it looks great. Pretty nice. That folds really flat. We have our bolt. This is a metric 8mm by 60 millimeters. And then there is this other nut, but it's actually threaded on the outside as well. So that was supposed to screw into the end. And you can see that the thread's no longer held. It just comes out really easily. So I picked these up. So these are 1/4 inch by 4.5 inches. So it's going to go quite far in, which is going to be good. In this case, what is actually important is that the bolt does not bear the load. Instead, the wood is going to be resting on the wood. So a little bit of flexibility with these, and they have that. They're just slightly springy. And these are torque drive, and they are intended for exterior use. And you can see just how far that's going to go in, and that should work perfectly. And these ones do have a self-drilling end on them, but I'm not going to rely on that because this is a pretty small piece and I don't want it to crack. So I am going to pre-drill that hole. A little squeaky, but otherwise seems to be working really well. That's good. That's not going to come apart. This ended up being too long because I had the holes placed slightly more towards the outside at 150 millimeters when it's supposed to be 135, and I should have noticed that, but I didn't. So I went ahead and I made new pieces, and I actually made some adjustments too, just so that they look a little bit nicer and tie in with the original design a little bit better. We're finally ready for sub-assembly, and this is a mixture of spruce, and we also have some cherry as well. Now, some of the parts that are cherry don't necessarily need to be, like this back support rail that goes into this housing here. But some of the parts I felt did need to be upgraded to a little bit harder wood, a little bit denser wood, because this is what was happening to the original. The leg comes down and sits on this piece on a little bit of an angle, and it was just compressing that material. So it really wasn't sitting in the ideal position. This is all going to be one assembly. It's going to be much more rigid than the original one was. I'm going to be using a combination of stainless steel nails, and I'm going to be using PL Premium. I'll just put a little bit on the ends as well. And here's something that I like to do. You can see these little tiny bumps in between here, all the way out right to the front. So that gives us a dedicated spot for our pieces to go to fit in between. So that way I know exactly where I need to put the glue, no marking with a pencil. This design has fairly thin slats for the seats, and I thought it probably would be a good idea to reinforce them a little bit. So I've made this central web piece. It's basically the exact same design as what I have on the end pieces here, or the gable ends, and it just goes right in the middle. I have it already marked out. Originally I thought that this was just a split in the wood, mainly because of this weak area that was created from the cup holder, and you can see how flexible that is. But if we turn it over, you can see that this is actually a lamination. So it just ended up being a weak spot where the glue joint failed over time. Flip this over and line it up. So it's been about a half an hour, and it's really easy when this is still a bit soft to come along and scrape it off. So we are ready to do a little bit of sanding and get some paint on this. I had all the wood for this project already, and most of it came from trees that I've cut down myself and slabbed up. So the most expensive part now of this project is the paint. This can of paint is exterior grade latex paint by Behr, and it came to over $70. And I will have 2 coats minimum, with 3 coats on any of the surfaces which take some abuse. There really isn't too much to assembling these. I am cleaning the paint from the holes for the bolted areas first, and I think it's probably smart to use a hardening oil like a tung oil or a boiled linseed oil in those holes so that that prevents rot over time if these are going to be left outside. Now the original was assembled completely with screws, but I wanted to try stainless steel brad nails and PL Premium instead. Now what did not go well at all was aligning the back slats. I was using PL here too. They ended up wanting to slide all over the place. The adhesive covered up my pencil marks too. So now I understand why the original backs were pre-assembled flat using painted steel straps. So I'm going to need to come up with a much better way to position them for the final design. And here is our final part that we're going to machine. It includes the optimized tool path for the best possible result and not blowing any more fuses. And it also includes the alignment pins to make sure that adding the back pieces is far easier than it was originally, but then they can also be machined in one step on the CNC machine, no additional steps. I did rough passes climb cut, and I find that when I do a finishing pass, I can do it conventional cut and I get a really nice smooth finish there. Now with that compression cutter, you can see that the setting for the depth wasn't quite right, but that's not really a big problem. That can easily be sanded off there. So some of the parts do need to be flipped over and alignment becomes a bit of an issue. So I just came up with an idea, and hopefully when we do the machining on the top side, when it does the final pass, it'll show us exactly where we need to flip the part over and place it much more precisely than on my old and worn section of the spoil board. And here's the rail with the roundovers added. These are required in this case because this pivots a little bit near the bottom of the armrest. And here are the alignment pins. So this is going to give us a defined position up and down, way easier to assemble. And they just fit like that. So it locks it in perfectly, and side to side there's a tiny amount of movement, but it's really the up and down that was causing me a lot of trouble. And what I think I'll do is just shrink this pocket down ever so slightly so we can get rid of that side-to-side motion as well. It's probably a good idea to seal any of the surfaces that meet and have the potential to rub paint off, like these ends of the tenons here that pivot, with something like a drying oil. I have linseed oil here, or some of this timber oil as well. Now these actually have the potential to ignite if you leave your rag. So be very careful with where you dispose of your rags or your paintbrushes. I usually put them in some water when I'm done. And we'll just seal the ends. And the other benefit of doing this is that I don't need to paint this area, and then I don't need to worry about how thick that paint's going to be on these pivots. So it's time to test them out. And I find these Adirondack chairs some of the most comfortable that I've ever sat in. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make these. They fold up really easily, so you can store these against a wall in a shed or in your basement. So you can see here, overall, they actually look very similar to each other, but it's more about the small details and the refinements that I've made. Now, because of the way this is designed, with the pivot point right here, the bottom leg has the ability to apply a lot of force to this front rail. And this front rail was not enjoying it with just the nails and the glue connection. So I had to add a screw. So I am actually going to replace the bottom U-frame here. I've already made some adjustments to the design. I've made this rail at the bottom a little bit wider. These front legs are also a little bit wider too, and they accept this rail into a little bit deeper housing. And that should provide more support, but a wider rail also is going to allow us to get 2 screws or 2 bolts in there really nicely. I've also added a nice curve to the front here as well, just so it matches some of the other details on the chair. We have these nice armrests. They just are a little bit more refined, like I mentioned, than the original ones you can see here that were just cut off straight there. I have nice curves, and of course on the top edge, 1/4 inch radius round over on there. I didn't really like the cove detail. I know that's a traditional look, but for me, I just prefer the smooth, clean lines of that 1/4 inch radius. We have stronger rails here. I've reinforced this area. We have the clearance, of course. I have a little bit larger radius here, a little bit more strength retained in this section. Now you can see here, there's a gap. It's actually 4.5 millimeters, around 3/16 of an inch, and that is not correct. So I'm not sure why exactly this worked out this way. The math just doesn't seem right. This should be a little bit longer, in fact, and push this piece away from the leg so it's not rubbing on the leg. So that's a change I've already made in the design. Again, on the structure, you can see this bottom back rail I've set at an angle on a diagonal. That just reinforces this bottom frame so it's not very wobbly. It's going to be a lot stronger, and I've already changed this to face the other direction in the final design so that can be hung on a wall if you wanted to. This is what the original one looked like. You can see it's really small and spindly. Underneath the armrests, you can see the arm support rail. First is laminated, not really ideal, and it's curved all the way around here. And you can see on mine, I have it dying perfectly into the bottom. Underneath the frame, there is absolutely nothing in addition for support, which is great when you want to create something that's lightweight and easy to move around. But I thought it was important to create a nice, strong structure at the base especially. That's going to make the whole thing feel a lot better. Also, when you're sitting in it, the boards are not going to be prone to breaking or flexing as much with this center support piece. Now looking at the bolts here, I have not put the washer nut on here. I just wanted to leave everything as open as possible until the paint completely cures. It was a little bit sticky, but these all should be galvanized at least. They could be carriage bolts as well. All these are 5/16, or you could go with 8mm bolts. So that's the changes that I've made so far from the original, but I've actually gone a little bit further than that after testing it and trying this chair out quite a bit. This needs a dedicated area which is flat that mates properly with this bottom rail. And that is another change that I've already made in the design. So overall, very happy with how these turned out. They're super comfortable. If you want to download your own, there is a link down there below. I will have both a Fusion 360 file, and I'm also gonna have a step file for these. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I want to thank my patrons for helping to support this channel and making these types of videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.